Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Media Shaman studio session. We're going to talk about the movie Collateral Beauty and whatever else you want to talk about. And hopefully you guys have seen the film. Did you both watch the film?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, let me turn this over to Mark, and you can begin.
All right, well, let's start with a perception practice. So let's get comfortable. And of course, eyes open or closed, as we always say for perception practices. And just focus on the breath for a moment. And invite us to think about our life and the losses we've experienced. And those can be losses of loved ones or losses of objects that we were attached to, or pets, or places, or experiences that we love, that when we're over, we missed. Just that sense of loss. And see if you could feel into that. Just be with that for a moment. Feel what it feels like in your body. Emotionally. And the thoughts that come up. And if one loss in particular seems the strongest, focus on that. And then see if you could feel into what happened after that loss in your life, between that loss and where you are now. And think about if that loss wasn't there, what you might have not experienced. Especially think about experiences you've had since that loss that were profound or important for you, or feel like they were helpful in your evolution. And then try to hold and think about, would it be worth it not to have had that loss? And not have had those other experiences? The positive experiences that emerged following that loss. And now see if you could feel into any moments of collateral beauty, moments of joy or beauty that you experienced connected to that loss. And ask yourself if you would let go of that as well, if you had the choice. Now I'd just like to go around really quickly and just each of us just share, if you feel it, what that loss was, or what the collateral beauty was that you experienced, or if you experienced any. I'll start. When I lost my mother, as she was dying, I was sitting by her bedside at a hospice for a week, and my family was all there, and we sat with her, we took turns. And it was in Phoenix, and it was the spring. And in between, I would sit outside on the patio, and I would have these moments of just incredible experiences of being present with the beauty around me. And I was so much more present to that beauty in the moment because of the experience I had sitting with my mother as she was dying. So there was this deep loss, and then incredible beauty, and just back and forth between this. And watching this film kind of really, what struck me most about it was I had never experienced a film that spoke to that experience that I had. And the name Collateral Beauty was like, oh, that's a perfect name for what I experienced. So that's really the main reason why I love this film. Now, I mean, as I analyzed it, yes, it has an integral worldview, but personally, I loved it just because it spoke to my own experience of collateral beauty. And welcome, Owana. You just checked in. I don't know if that's how you pronounce your name, but I just wanted to welcome you. What we're doing is we're going around. We just did an exercise and we're expressing, talking about moments of loss we had, and if we had any moments of collateral beauty. So now, Lynn or Michael or Jonathan, you want to go next?
Well, okay, I'll go. I always appreciate a film that tries to tackle loss. And it seems to be an experience that I've had a couple of different experiences of losing a brother and a sister, both very suddenly, of things that were kind of simmering, but all of a sudden they were gone. And it's like this suffering was over, but we didn't know when it was going to happen. And then losing my parents and being with both of them. I was lucky enough to be with them in their last days. And putting that into a different perspective than what I would call the worst and the most instructive, therefore the most beautiful, was when our first child died, when we took her off of life support. And it was very much a decision where we were asked to participate in decision-making about how much intervention was going to possibly save her life. And knowing that it felt very much in that situation as if I was, the decision was, I felt extremely present. In fact, it was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life while she was in that limbo of that deciding. And the grief after that really opened me up. I mean, I went to a support group I'll shorten this, but I went to a support group for people who had lost children. And it blew my mind. A friend of mine said, well, I don't think you should go to that because you're being exposed to so much pain. But, it's like being a nurse, it's like this really widened and deepened my understanding of how ephemeral life is, and how I'm not saying I've always held to that understanding, but it was very powerful. It's hard to stay in that, but it was I can go back to it pretty readily, and thinking about her and the time that we had together was it's very profound. The experience we went through together, that's the way I describe it. So yeah. So
And how did the film affect you then?
The film, well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this morning, that one of the things I think is so interesting is that they kept it really clear. They never really talked about the daughter's experience. They never really talked about what they went through together. They didn't talk about, it was just her, she left. And it was the absence of her that caused them to go in such different directions in their response. But it was a really simple, they didn't complicate the story. And I think that probably makes it more powerful, because it makes it more everybody's story. Yeah. I definitely understand the term. When they said, when he was about to describe what Collateral Beauty was, or when they were discussing it, I knew what they were going to say. Boom. It's like, this is where they talk about Collateral Beauty. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go then.
Okay.
I lost my wife and I had a stroke. And I think that I have time now, space, and I live a lot slower life than I used to. So I'm taking time to see things and look at things and learn new things. And I don't think I'd be in virtual reality if that hadn't happened. I've connected with all these people, and especially this last year for me was a great year. I learned so much. I was learning software and I was doing things, and all that came out of her death. So that was very good for me. I was confused a bit by the movie, because I thought they were doing a deceptive thing at first, and he was going to find out, he was just going to be mad or something. It was really weird the way it all turned around. So yeah.
Thank you.
My turn.
Sure. Hey, Marijuana, how you doing?
Good. Hi, Jonathan. Nice to meet you. See you again. Well, I think I've experienced moments of collateral beauty many times in my life. And one that I remember with loss or not. And I want to speak first to this other one that wasn't with loss. But then I'll speak about loss as well, and why I love this movie. So this moment of absolute incredible collateral beauty that stayed with me for a long time, and I'm still not sure why it's so powerful for me, is when I was in grad school in Canada, and I just had my golden retriever. He was a puppy, and we were on the street in Toronto, and my golden went to this homeless man that was sitting on the street, like just sitting with a can in front of him. And my puppy he wasn't somebody who would just go to just about anybody. He knew his choices. But he used to go to this man, and to this day, I remember being impressed, and even have to hold myself higher about the dignity of that man, the way he asked. I had a lot of people coming to me to play with a dog without asking, but that man asked in such a regal stance, "May I pet your dog?" And I remember being shocked by the voice and by the presence. And I said, yes, of course. And I was sitting there. And then the most amazing thing happened when this man who had no shelter sheltered my dog for minutes under his arm, and he was so kind towards the dog. And at some point they were done, and again, he still remember to this day, he said thank you, but in that, you know, you don't find that kind of dignity often here in Silicon Valley. And at that moment, there was that moment of collateral beauty where I sensed a much bigger presence behind this man. He was not a beggar at all. And for some reason, that wasn't a loss, that was a guidance. But that moment stuck with me because it always had me question of who we are beyond what we see. But yes, I've dealt with a lot of losses in my life, and only recently I realized that it was actually a repetitive loss for me, and it wasn't necessarily, well, it ends up being personal, but it's actually at national level. I was born in Romania, and as a 21.
Oh, you lost your sound. There you go.
Yeah, for some reason I got muted. I stepped right into the revolution, and I remember that being sort of a choiceless choice. It's what's happening at the national level, and there's a revolution going in the street, and you make that split-second choice that affects the rest of your life. So I've seen horrible things in my life, and I had to understand that in many ways I have more of a veteran's brain than many other people, and it's that kind of loss where there's also something called survival guilt. So I worked a lot with that. But there was also a moment of absolutely incredible beauty, because after that happened, and a lot of people have lost their lives, including people my age, and it was very hard for me to reconcile that. But what held me, again, it was one of those moments that I think you feel blessed that you've got a chance to experience in your lifetime, where there was a woman who had sort of held the flag of freedom for an
Oh, you just froze up, Oana.
I didn't freeze up. I froze up in a different way. So thanks for being patient.
I'm going to switch my video off and see if that helps.
Oh,
No, I mean, she froze up regardless of your video, Mark.
yeah, I don't think it's you, Mark.
So no, I didn't freeze up. I just had a very strong emotional response, and I needed to put my hand on my heart. That's what the freezing was. This woman had the flag of freedom for an entire country. Her daughter was in Western Europe and was on this radio called Free Europe. And this was an older lady. She was in prison in her house for 10 years. And I remember about her. Sort of dissident, right? It was like the underground. And after the revolution happened, in the same place where there was all the killing and shooting and all that kind of stuff, later on there were about 10,000 people, and she came around. And everybody went really quiet and silent, and everybody in that plaza kneeled down in silence. So I can tell you what it's like to be present to something like that, where there is unity in sort of this bigger deal, you know, that you kneel in front of a woman because she actually kept hope alive in a country that didn't have much.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it's very painful for me. And that's why I said that loss is repetitive for me, because it's very painful to and have a massive ignorance about what that country meant and who the people are, and constantly being judged as whatever people, you know, mass media told people. So that feels, unfortunately, like a repetitive loss.
Yeah.
Trying to disconnect from that identity, to be constantly judged and labeled and talked about your country that had so much to suffer. And it wasn't, again, the country was put in a choiceless choice behind an iron curtain decided by the Western world. So there was a lot of frustration for me to see now how I've lived already through a wall, right? A wall that was a political wall and an economical wall that my country just got stuck under, my former country. And it was very painful for me because I consider US my country, and it was very painful for me to see that now we build a wall to the south. So these are the kind of losses I had to deal with, and I still do.
Wow. Well, thank you for that sharing,
And the
Alana.
reason,
Thank you.
I
but
should
the
say that
reason the movie spoke, thank you. The reason the movie spoke to me was, well, because I feel like we all have gone through things like so beautiful how Lynn also shared about the presence, right? The being present, being fully present. And I think we've all had to deal with losses that we recognize or don't recognize at some point. And we walk around thinking, oh, we were fine, but we don't know that subtle part of your soul that's had to survive all that. And that basically to this man was happening in, you know, real world. It's a real deal, and we often don't know the wounds we walk around with. But also I really love that image of the puzzle or the domino comes up and comes down, and we're all trying to, for me it's such a wonderful metaphor, because we're always trying to construct a domino of whatever we know, and when it falls apart something else is happening. So that's the constructive part of, yeah, I gotta let go, and I had to figure out I didn't even know I was angry until it showed up in my body. So looking at life as a puzzle or a domino, I think for me is a powerful metaphor.
Yep,
So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I should say that Alana is the reason we're doing this, because she's the one who first hit me to the movie, and I watched it. I watched it and said, this is integral, and I told Mark you should watch it because you would probably enjoy it. And
Thank you.
can
Thank
talk
you.
a little bit about that. Hey, Tom, welcome to the gathering.
Oh my God, I just came from Mutations with Jeremy and Gebser, and it was fucking amazing.
So we're talking about, we did a practice to start out with where Mark was talking about a loss that we felt, and if we found any collateral beauty in that loss relating to the film. And so we've been kind of going around. I guess I can go next. I recently lost a friend of mine, Jerry Hyken, who was an actor. He was 93 years old, I believe, incredible guy. And he and his wife are sort of like my other parents in a way, and in a much more normal way than my actual parent. I also lost both of my actual parents in the last 3 or 4 years. And it was very interesting to watch that process when Jerry died, because he had been at Stanford, and then they brought him home. I said, he has to come home. And so he was home, and they had a hospital bed in the house, and his kids were both there. And so it was a really beautiful contrast to the way my parents both died in the hospital, neither of them really having any sort of spiritual background. So none of them had any sense that this is a sacred process going on. So that the collateral beauty for me was just in watching how to die properly. You know, I mean, if you're going to die, and, you know, Jerry started to lose it at the end, but he was still there, and his wife was there holding his hand, and she knew she was communicating with him at times. And so it was a very kind of beautiful experience, even though we lost him, obviously. But, you know, he was 93, he had quite a run. And so that was, I guess we all have a lot of experience around death. That's kind of a lot of collateral beauty around death. And Tom, I don't know if you feel like sharing. If you have something, you don't have to. You can move on.
Well, around grief and loss, I guess.
Or around anything where you lost something. It could be a divorce or a death or anything like that, and found collateral beauty in it.
Well, one ongoing thing right now is my oldest sister is dying, and she's almost 12 years older, so she was like a second mom too. So there's all of that. But she first been on hospice 3.5 years ago. So, but and is coming, and there's less and less communication too, because she is not feeling well enough to do Zooms very much now. And the only thing, I'm a big fan of Michael Franti, and he has a wonderful song. I sent it to my sister on Facebook, but I don't think she's seen it. I have to send it by email. But I can't remember the title right now, but it's a song he's writing to some girlfriend he had in high school. He hasn't really seen since. And it just has this refrain of we go on and on and on. The last time I saw my sister was now 2 years ago. And we just looked at each other as I was leaving, and I just said to her, "See you next time." And she said, "See you next time." We just looked in each other's eyes, because that's all I could think of to say, because I figured that was going to be the last time I saw her in these forms, at least. And I guess the other thing is, just especially during COVID, it's become more apparent that grief comes in waves. And it's a very important process, for me at least, to realize that and let it come in and let it go out, and not try to hold it away or hold it in. I mean, hold it present.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a couple of things here. One of the things that I found beautiful about this work was how it worked with the shadow. And one of the things we talk about a lot in our course is the importance of shadow work. And this, especially, for being a media shaman, if you want to use media to heal others, what I love about shamanism, and one of their ideas here, is that wounds in our shadows are there to help us. They guide us. They're teachers. And if you're called to the shamanic path, you're usually called through some kind of wound that you're called to heal. And they also have this idea of making a friend of death. And that when you make a friend of death is when you really experience life. When death, the gift of death, or making a friend of death, is being fully here now, present. And grief and loss, as profoundly painful as it is, one of the gifts of it is it's hard not to be fully in the moment when you're experiencing grief and loss. I mean, even when you're thinking of the past with that grief of what you've lost, there is this deep kind of grounding in the now. And there's this other thing too that's in various traditions, that is about a broken heart. The gift of a broken heart is that when it heals, it's more expanded. So when our heart breaks, if we heal it, if we don't run away from the wound, if we work it, if we work with the grief and with the loss, if we don't repress it, it always opens us to feel more life, more love. And that's what I loved about this film, is for me, it captured that in a very simple and beautiful way. Now, I don't think it's a perfect film. It's got flaws, but it really does, for me, capture that that cosmic. I mean, for an integral film, one of the keys to an integral film is they often tend to give us an experience of something beyond our comprehension. Mm-hmm. You almost get a sense like there is a wisdom here. There is a guiding force. But an integral filmmaker won't often show that to you. You'll feel it. You'll feel it just beyond the story itself.
Yeah.
the mystery, like you could almost feel the great mystery touching the edges of you. And that for me was also very palpable in this work. So now I was going to open up, but Jonathan, you wanted to say something, bring up something else here as well.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to address the issue of why the critics hated this film so dramatically. And if you read some of the reviews, they're quite hostile to the film. One of them is like, if you're ever at a party and you describe this idiotic film, people won't believe you that it got made because it's so terrible. I mean, that kind of reaction.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, really
Yeah,
hated the film. And I watched the film because I wanted to had recommended it. And I looked at the description and said, oh, this looks like it could be integral. It might be a piece of shit, but at least it might be integral. And we're interested in that. And it turned out to be pretty good and surprisingly witty and just kind of all kinds of things that sort of worked. And it made me think about this fact we've talked about before, that most film critics are pluralistic at the pluralistic structure. And it's hard for them to see things that could look treacly and see the integral level, because there are a lot of things that are treacly but aren't integral that would be similar to this in a way, but not operating at any higher level. And people will tend to react to them. So I think it triggered a lot of people. I think it would have been treated more compassionately if it wasn't Will Smith, who's a giant action movie star, you know, so him trying to act this sort of small role of a grief-stricken father, I think probably people thought it felt indulgent. But it was just very interesting to me, that question of why critics hated the film so dramatically. So to me, one of the things that helped me in my framing almost from the get-go is that I framed it more as a fairy tale or as magical realism. And at that point, then things that aren't logical or that kind of seem a little plot-wise seem a little silly just didn't bother me. But if you're very in the rational structure as far as plot, then things that if the plot goes on, you say, oh, they're betraying their partner and friend, they're doing this creepy thing and all that kind of stuff, you know. So once you see it as magical realism, and then as it pays off, you realize that there is a purpose to all these different characters, and each of the characters gets matched up with, you know, one of them gets matched up with death, one gets matched up with time, one gets matched up with love, and each of them gets matched up with the one they need to heal their arc as well. So there's this internal set of healings. So it's got sort of a beautiful structure there. And yeah, as Mark said, not a perfect film, but you know, I thought much better than the critical response would suggest. So I wanted to open that.
That's a great point too, because one of the things is films often can make a critical mistake in one little part of a film that can throw off a lot of people from the rest of the film. And so in this film, there's a moment, one of the things that this film, one of the, basically for me, the big hole in the film is how each of the three friends ends up with their counterpart. That's not shown. And that becomes a logic gap. So for example, people who operate at the rational won't hop over that gap.
Very interesting.
So it's a little gap. It's like one little, even half a scene that's missing.
It is kind of major because each of them then ends up with this character who's so important to their own development. So
yes,
that should have been.
So the rest of the story, depends on that moment.
So why was that not in the film?
You don't know, but
Good question to ask the director.
Yeah, but I have to say, you know, as a filmmaker, you know, filmmaking, I mean, media making is hard, you know, and it is not easy. And just the fact that a film gets made is miraculous. Literally, yeah. It's, John Huston said, any film that's in the can is a miracle. He said, because what a filmmaker is doing is trying to create a alternate reality, an alternate universe for us to experience. And the real universe looks at us and says, huh, so you think it's easy, huh? And throws everything at you. I mean, but that was just his thing. But the idea, basically, it is a great, it's a hard thing to make a great film. It really is. And when you look at a filmmaker, even like Ava DuVernay, who is a brilliant, brilliant filmmaker who's done some amazing works, she did an amazingly incredible job with Wrinkle in Time. And she only made one mistake. But that mistake was at the climax of the film. And she lost a lot of people. So losing the pivotal moments are really, a filmmaker, I'm thinking of, it's very similar to when I was working on my dissertation. And my committee chairman said, you got to get readers, outside readers, to keep reading it. And you have to just get fresh eyes on it. Because what happens is that as we're involved in something, our minds fill in the blanks. So this filmmaker, they could have been in the cutting room for months, right? And their mind was filling in the blanks for that pivotal moment. We don't know. But often we get caught in that. But understanding that's important. So looking for those moments. So one of the things we try to teach is that looking for the pivotal moments, the small ones and the big ones, looking at the different story streams and like mapping where those moments are is very helpful.
So can I ask a question, Mark?
Sure.
When you first explained that, it's like, I hadn't noticed that missing. And I was thinking about in your class where you talk about how they used to have to show every step of something. So is this an example? Am I giving myself too much credit for like, oh, it made sense to me? Or did I just not notice something that really was a logical piece missing? I mean, to me, everybody does end up with the person they're meant to be with in a way. Like there's always something that's going to be brought forth. And so that's kind of the way I was looking at it, but I didn't notice that.
Yeah, well, it depends on your structure of consciousness too. So if you're mythic or pluralistic or integral, you could often skip over that. But if you have a very strong rational kind of frame, there's no way you're going to hop over that. Because the rational is very rooted in linear logic.
Yeah.
Mythic storytelling often will skip over those little kind of logic moves. And pluralistic will do it too, because there's the pluralistic, we're more attuned to the subjective as well. So this, and non-linear storytelling.
Boy, that's really great what you're saying about having the more eyes on the project to make sure an error like that doesn't get made. That's really a good point.
And with I assume, a big Hollywood film, there's never a chance after the final cut for the director to go, oh shit, I need to, even if they have had footage that they could use or shoot, since obviously everything's already long gone. So that
Yeah,
never happens, does it,
things
Mark?
get scheduled. Yeah, I mean, they may have shot it and it might not have worked. I mean, they may have a scene that didn't work. They may have had a technical problem. They may have had all kinds of things happen in movies, you know. I would say in this film as well, I mean, there are other things. We've talked in the past a bit about holonic structuring, which when you layer these secondary layers, and this film actually has two other stories, which I'm sorry, I'm going to blow it for you because you haven't seen it, Tom, but too bad, you shouldn't be here. But, you know, there's the sub story that the woman who's the grief counselor turns out to be his ex-wife and the mother of the child. And that, I watched the film again, it's really not in there that much. They didn't lay down a rich pathway for that. There's a few little hints of it where he says, our child, my child, like there's a few things like that, but it's not deep even the way something like Sixth Sense laid down really elaborate secondary patterns that all suddenly make sense. And this didn't really have that. So the surprise endings and the other surprise ending that the three actors turn out to actually be Time, Love, and Death also isn't to me that well laid down. So it didn't have that richness that a great film would have had. It kind of did all these things in the script level, but it didn't lay them down in a sophisticated way. So I think that's another reason why, as Mark said, for people who are more grounded in the rational or even the pluralistic, some of that was just like too clever by half, probably for people.
Yeah.
They just
Yeah,
didn't know
But
it.
those, yeah, but
This is not
But
the film
those-
where he was the typewriter salesman, right? That's a whole different film, yeah?
Yeah, not that.
yeah, that's a whole different.
That's what I thought. Just wanted to be sure.
But the key here is that those weren't holes. They were just not, those two were just shallow streams.
Hmm.
But the hole is a hole. So, so my conjecture, what I believe is that that one hole early on, which is the one we're talking about, which is how did the three friends end up with the three spirits, let's say, matched up perfectly. That is a major hole because the whole rest of the film depends on those streams. Whereas what Jonathan's talking about is basically the difference between a light film and a deep, rich, complex work, which would be much, you know what I mean? So, so I believe that if that one hole wasn't there, a lot more people would have loved and seen this film. But, what? No? No, I know. I can't hear you. Unmute.
It's so interesting that we're talking about this because it is like you're saying, the different points of view from consciousness. I didn't see those as holes at all. I had much more an experience closer to Lynn. I felt like all those things were the moments of collateral beauty. It's like the main story is like a tree, and everything else is collateral beauty. It's not just the main story that's collateral beauty, it's all these other things, including the positive things that I know I've experienced in my whole life, how one note can make a difference in your life, or one friend who stands up for you at the right time, right? And we've all experienced that. So those are also moments of collateral beauty on this tree that the movie to me built on, you know, the trunk is the main story, and then the rest it's up to us. And it's so funny because I loved the suspense. I love the fact that it was a surprise. I love the fact that having more room to it, having what you call a hole or an incomplete or a gap, leaves room for everybody's consciousness to decide what they take for themselves, instead of being told right away
Yes.
Yep.
what the, you know, it's for you.
Yep. Art classes are all
I
about how
have
you
to say-
reach the most people.
Yeah.
I have to say, I fully agree with you. My experience was the same as yours. I love this movie.
Yeah.
I went all the way with it. What I'm talking about is when I saw it the first time, I loved it all the way. And I love I even love that hole. It worked for me. But then when I started analyzing it, I realized, but this wouldn't work for people at the rational.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Worked
You're
fine for
trying to
me.
put from the perspective.
Worked great for me.
Right.
I went with it. I loved it. So, but but then looking at it, it's like, well, yeah, it will lose people who are really rooted in that logic. But I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I understand that
So
one.
what would that scene, what would they have had to do for the rational level in that scene? Have some sort of a choice made? Like everybody gets to choose, or everybody gets assigned, or there's some explanation?
No, it would be more subtle than that. If I was doing it, I would basically have one of the spirit guides.
Mhm.
I mean, you could do it simply with one of the spirit guides, like I'm saying, and like just, focusing on the person who they wanted to connect with. So you could have a very simple scene where
Yeah.
the three spirit guides initiate conversations with the ones they wanted to connect with. That's all you had to do.
In
Yeah.
fact, we've seen examples in which they actually give a rational reason for an integral structuring. So, like, I don't know if you remember in the last Star Wars film, Lando Calrissian ends up being the one who saves the other black character. So the black man gets to be the hero and save the black man in the Millennium Falcon. But rather than just assigning it, which would then look like a pluralistic thing and could be triggering, they'd be, oh, they had to have the black guy save the black guy. They actually gave a rational reason. Poe was going to save him, and Lando was in the Millennium Falcon, said, I'm faster than you. I'm in the Millennium Falcon. And he's the one who saves it because he's got the faster ship. And yet, so it still gave that moment to all of the African-American viewers, which is really important to have this moment where an iconic black character from Star Wars gets to save another iconic black character from Star Wars, but they give it a rational frame so nobody could get triggered by it. And that's what an integral filmmaker will do, that to try to integrate all of the different structures of consciousness so that they all have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
So it was missing that rational reason for them to be connected, and then you never notice it, and then, oh yeah, they're connected for this reason, but it somehow works out,
That's fascinating.
So, I mean,
But
this film is perfect.
I love what it was always my own curiosity. What you're saying is, what's the game behind the veil, right? And I always wanted to know what's the game behind the veil. And as a scientist, I always admit that through my own understanding, what's happening, it's a matter of conserving energy. So if you can do good, hit two birds with one stone, right? If you can do good, why not spread that? And what you're talking about is exactly that, seeing it, how there's a possible choice for better good than just one. Yes. And oftentimes we don't understand that. We don't see it from our sort of blocked consciousness. But when you look behind the veil, then that makes sense. And I love the fact that you thought about, actually, that could be a viewpoint in the movie.
Well, I find that, have you ever found yourself in a conversation with a strictly rational person where they want to tie a conversation all to one detail of connection? And my mind is like, well, wait, but there's a whole thing surrounding, and they don't want to hear that. They just want to know that one thing. Very interesting.
So is there, going back to something you said a little while ago, Mark, is there a film that on the surface is a light film that has integral depths and has it all there, that was intentionally done as it could be seen in a light way and has all that depth there for those who can see it?
Say it, Jonathan.
I'm going to do your
lots of them. Well, we're always going to start with Black Panther because that's, a large mass market Marvel superhero film, yet it's probably the most complex work either of us have ever seen, as far as how it layers all the structures of consciousness into a unified whole. And yet I watched it with three other white people so they couldn't see what black people could see probably, but none of them saw any of them. They saw, it was okay. And I was like, in tears through the whole film. Like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
But Black Panther, even on the surface, was a pretty complex film. I mean, there was a lot going on and a lot of storylines and so on.
Yeah, it has a complex plot, I guess, somewhat.
Well, but Black Panther on the surface can be seen as just a superhero film.
Right.
And a lot of people just saw it as a superhero film. But the layers and layers and layers of that film is just amazing.
Okay, more of a challenge then. What about a like rom-com that has all that depth?
All right.
I think you
That's a
mentioned
good one.
one actually in class, but I'll wait.
There's been other rom-coms that actually are working at the integral structure. I don't know of ones that are that successful at really integrating them all. Do you, Mark? Have you seen any? I mean, like we've recently seen
I'll have
the
to think
Groundhog
about that
Day
one.
type films like Palm Springs and Map of Tiny Human Things or Tiny Perfect Things.
Well,
Like,
yeah, well, rom-coms are, one of the things about rom-coms is there is a lightness about them. So it's a little bit trickier, whereas a superhero film, there can be darkness and heavy stuff and still feel superficial. But a rom-com, it's now if you don't say rom-com, but a kind of a romantic drama, whatever, then we may be able to open it up. But rom-com,
yeah, if you go back to romantic with a capital R, then it definitely has depth and drama.
yeah.
One of
But
the things
rom-coms,
that's
that's
I'm sorry.
no,
One
go
of the
ahead.
things that's very obvious to me, if you think about light things, are cartoons, right? But if you look at the cartoons that are being made these days, we've just had Frozen and Dragons, and there's a new one called Soul that's talking about life between lives, for God's sake. So, or Inside Out, for example, to me that was such a beautiful movie, dealing with complexity that adults don't know how to deal with, and yet it's teaching it to children how to deal with emotions. It's pretty brilliant. So.
Yeah.
And it's done in a light way.
And
so,
the most recent one, Soul.
Yeah, she mentioned Soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't
And
watched it. I have to see it.
My favorite band, Keela, did a live concert, and they have done lots of soundtracks. And there's this new film coming out. I can't remember the name of it. Has a tune in the title of the company, but it's an Irish animation company. And it's about a girl and wolves. And there were lots of clips as they were performing live of this. And it's exactly that. I mean, yeah. And I can't wait to see that. And the music's awesome because it's my favorite band. And it had, it's all Celtic myth.
Wow.
But it looked very cool too. It's the same ones who did, now I can't remember any of the names. Book of Kells was their very first one, but this looks so much more complex than that was. This is like their fourth or fifth. And the New Yorker did an article on this Irish studio, but I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, animation, I think, can kind of cut loose a little bit more because the rules are more loose for that. I mean, even things like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, another superhero film, which was quite complex and beautifully.
One I've made a lot of reference to lately was, I don't know if you remember that movie called The Point with this little kid Oblio, and it's with narrated by Harry Nelson. It's this kid with triangle head or round head, born in a village of triangle heads. It's really funny, but it's like it's totally up to date, and the music is wonderful. You remember that movie?
So I don't know that I ever even saw it, but I remember there's a song, right?
Yeah, there are many. One is about a
Me and
town.
My Arrow.
Yeah.
Don't get it in your head.
And
It's a horrible.
Yeah.
And it's
I
all about
haven't seen that.
belonging and judgments.
I guess that's from
You would love it, I think.
1971. It looks like it might be from is it Canadian? From the Canadian.
No, it's made by Harry Nelson and narrated by Ringo Starr.
Oh, Harry Nilsson's story. Wow, interesting.
So the music is
Yeah, Harry Nilsson did the music in that song.
Would you recommend it?
Oh, I have it on DVD. It's one of my favorite movies.
Wow.
I love it. It's just so funny and witty, and actually there's one point that when he talks again about the vanishing point, and if you really understand what the vanishing point is, it's actually that transition between the wounded part towards the light, right, from the shadow to the light, and it's just really beautiful. I love it. So if anyone wants it, I have it on DVD. If you can't find it anywhere else, I'm happy to blown it. I've been wanting to watch that movie with other people for a long time.
It just had an anniversary of some kind because it was on the news sometime in the last couple of years. But that must be like the 40th anniversary or 40th.
Yeah, 1971, so it would have been this year.
Oh, well then, yeah, then it's time for it to come back.
There you go.
Yeah, Ringo
So,
Starr,
are you
Dustin
good?
Hoffman, Alan Thicke. Interesting cast.
Yeah,
Wow.
it has everyone from that
They
time.
were all in that movie?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll have to check that out.
I think I abhorred Harry Nilsson back then. It was, I didn't want to see it.
Yeah, well, if you'd heard that song over and over,
Right.
you
Right.
would not want to see them.
Which one, Lime in the Coconut or Courtship of Eddie's
Oh
Father?
God, don't bring up Lime in the Coconut.
There's one that I've been saying,
anything.
this is the town and these are the people. And during the COVID times, it's like, I've been singing that a lot.
I was singing it just a few days ago.
Oh, yeah?
Coconut.
If
It's
you're
in the
interested-
zeitgeist.
Mhm.
So Oana, do you think, I mean, I have to go back to it, but I would think it's more postmodern than integral, but maybe it managed to go past postmodern.
I apologize that actually Jonathan invited me and he told me a lot about Mark and your work, but I'm actually not familiar with the framework that you are using. So I don't know the terms that you're using very well. I'm trying to catch up. I kind of blaze, but I haven't, Jonathan, we met in the park and we were talking about Wim Hof breathing. And he
Sure,
mentioned
okay.
Mark
You met
with
in the
much
park?
respect and a little bit about the work, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. I mean, basically, there's a framework that we go through. We evolve through structures of consciousness, and they can be classed in evolutionary terms from mythic to rational to pluralistic. And then integral is above pluralistic because it's not just sort of seeing all points of view as equal, but actually finding a higher truth. Because you can get into a pathology in the pluralistic structure where you're like, well, he has a truth and he has a truth and they have a truth and all truths are true. And then you lose the ability to sort out right from wrong. And so there's a whole, Mark does have a list of integral films on IMDb, which I'll post in the chat right now if you want to take a look. Integral movie and TV list for those of you who haven't seen this.
Yeah, basically the integral structure of consciousness is when we shift into our main orientation and drive is to understand as much of reality as possible and seek the big picture, how it all interconnects. And so that's kind of the drive when we're at the integral stage of development.
Yeah, it'll be fun to talk more. I just gave a talk at East and West not long ago about Enlightenment Revisited, but from a biology perspective. But again, the same questions, right? And I'm apologize, Jonathan. I don't know. I was really busy and I didn't think about inviting people. I just thought,
Oh, don't worry about it.
Oh, it's all
you
good.
guys will do a good job. But yeah, these are fun things to ponder, but also to be there, right? To be in that place where you feel like we've conquered our wounds and we see the better view. Just because I learned for myself that the image we hold of other people biologically has an influence on other people, and that has been, I think, this path of what I consider responsibility. So when I hold a narrow viewpoint, I'm actually constricting other people in my narrow viewpoint as well. They're not free. And so when you look at life that way, then it becomes a huge place of responsibility. But for me, it was a little too much responsibility. I had to lighten up as well about it. But it is true that our consciousness is so huge. When we're narrow, the other person doesn't have the same choices. Actually, in their behavior, in the way, like if we project victimhood on somebody else, they will certainly feel it.
Oh, absolutely.
And nobody wants to feel victim. So.
Yeah. I don't know if everyone here has ever been in the presence of somebody who they would consider a bodhisattva or an advanced spiritual being. But I've been blessed by being in the presence of a few people who I felt that from, and it was almost like entering a different field. I was at a talk by Krishnamurti in the 80s. And there were like 500 of us in an oak grove. And he spoke for about an hour and a half. And in that hour and a half, he never said the words I or me. The way he spoke was, we are having a conversation here. Are we asking, seems like we're asking the question, what is beauty? Is beauty that? And but it was, by the end, when it was over, we were walking out like 500 people in total silence. And then one person by me said, whoa, did you feel that? It was like, my mind just went empty, like at the beginning. And like, I've just been in an altered state ever since. And then everybody started, oh my God, you too? And it was like, we all had a shared state experience. Just being in his presence.
Yeah.
So for me, that's an example of, or even Oana, when you told us the story of the homeless person that you experienced with your dog. It felt, as you were, as you were explaining or talking about it, I've had those experiences where it's like the person, it's almost like there's a different quality of expansiveness with that person.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, our consciousness, you know, has profound impact, and that can be shared through media. And some of the great, even some of the great works of art. I mean, if you have ever seen Michelangelo's David in person, or Rembrandt's Night Watch, or, you know, it's like, or even if you've watched a Kubrick film, there's a palpable presence to their work. It's almost like you, a friend of mine was saying, it's almost like they have put so much of who they are into it that you could almost feel their living presence radiating from their work.
The Pietà did that for me.
Yeah, the Pietà. Oh, yes, yes. Me too. Pietà.
Especially for me, the one that's the rough done one that he didn't finish.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that one is amazing. I don't remember where it is, but I want to go back to Italy just to see that again.
Yep.
So we could really, I mean, so this expansive consciousness can be actually shared through expression as well. Creative expression.
And
that's one of the things we work on in our course as well, is that's why the first two sections of our course is about filmmaker or media maker consciousness. What we're bringing to our creative process is foundational.
One of the things I wonder if you know about Alvin Ailey, the group of dancers. I am surprised that here people don't know Alvin Ailey. It's like the big.
Oh, you froze up again. I saw Alvin Ailey a number of times.
That goes from, yeah, and Revelation is just incredible, and it's just, how come people don't know about that? And it's just in the body, right? Because ultimately the idea is that it's kind of like you said, Mark, the expression of who you are is in the body. It's in the enlightenment is in the body. You have to express it in whatever way it works for each person. And I'm so surprised that we still have all this turmoil around. It's just watch Alvin Ailey and it takes you from slavery to freedom in 10 minutes.
So I see that we're past our 1 o'clock time. We usually go for an hour. Did anyone have any final thoughts or comments before we wrap this up?
Well, I would say Anna, is that how you pronounce your name? Oana?
Wanna.
Is it
Wanna.
That Juana, when you were talking about your past in Romania, I was really moved, and that sounds like a story that would really be an incredible one being shared in film. I just witnessing, that woman bringing a whole field of people down like that just sounds incredible, and the sorrow that happened in your country that others don't understand. It can happen. And it did happen. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for saying that. It's
So
so
thank you for
interesting
telling
that that's not the story I wanted to tell. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting why I never wanted to tell that story. I wanted to tell a story of winning, not a story of losing.
Yeah.
Mm. But in a way, that was a winning.
But I can see.
That
Yeah.
moment
Yeah. Thank you.
when
That's true.
where all of these people, there was the way you talked about that experience, that all of these people were resonating
Yeah.
together. That is a transformative experience. That's a transfiguration that goes beyond the suffering and makes it, it's a moment of the human spirit transcending and transfiguring sorrow and injustice, and it's like this, it's in the face of that darkness.
Yeah. It's making consciousness visible, maybe a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit like.
Perhaps it's touching.
Sorry, go ahead.
Perhaps it's touching that place of what I call sacredness. It's that human spirit that we don't understand, and the only word that I can find for it is sacredness. There's something sacred in this that everybody experiences on their own. But when there's a unity of 10,000 people in a whole country in front of it, it's very palpable. Actually, there's a it becomes physiological. You actually feel it.
Yes.
And I think we're all surrounded by these moments of sacredness all the time. But when it becomes a shared experience, then it becomes that much stronger. It becomes a field, a
And
palpable field.
Yeah. And two or more are gathered.
Oh, that's where I left off from the Gebser group. That's a nice full circle.
The lower left quadrant.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I want to thank everyone for showing up here and being part of this discussion. I think we had a great discussion, not only about Collateral Beauty, but about Collateral Beauty in general, not just the movie. And if you haven't seen the film, we recommend it. Taum. And
I've already paid for that service.
And now
for a month, so.
Yeah, and now that you've gone into the witness protection program, apparently, standing in front of a window, so we can't see anything.
This is my true form right here. See?
Oh, there you go.
I'm
I
just
see.
dreaming, all of you. I have a friend who took a nap, fell asleep next to his cat on the floor, and he was convinced he had the weirdest dreams, and he was totally convinced he had seen his cat's dream.
It's possible. He connected to his cat. Maybe his cat is actually a princess.
Right.
All right. Well, so thank you everyone for showing up, and
Thank you.
greetings to all those watching the video from the Conscious Good Creators Network, and hopefully we'll see you guys at the next event.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was very nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Same here.
Yeah.
Here.